Hi guys, Miss Titus here again. So I wanted to walk you through a couple of things on this PearDeck. So it is self-paced, so you get to control the slides and click through kind of like what we did when we first were learning nouns and verbs. But this time our new grammar concept is dialogue. So I'm going to walk you through what dialogue is, the punctuation rules, and then a couple of examples, and then point some things out in the questions that you actually have to answer. So first up, what is dialogue? Dialogue is a conversation between characters in a story and is very important to add interest to the piece, give information about the characters, and to move the plot forward. So, as we've learned when we were learning about characterization, speech or characters talking to each other is one way that authors can show us information about characters or show us a conflict or keep things moving forward. So, dialogue is a tool in the actual writing that authors use to make the piece interesting. And what we mean by piece is the story, to show us something about the characters or to reveal parts of the conflict that are either starting it, making it worse, or making it more interesting, or it could even be the climax when it's turning around. So now that we know what dialogue is, let's talk about some of the rules, because there are very specific rules that we have to follow when we are adding dialogue into our own writing that are also helpful to notice when we're looking at an author's piece of writing. So again, I want to point out these arrows. You get to click back and forth to these as many times as you need to. So the rules. Number one thing you want to look for dialogue is look for the dialogue tag. So the dialogue tag is the part of the sentence that tells you who is speaking. So you're going to look for things like said Mike, stated Melanie, Bobby yelled, Karen replied, Miss Titus exclaimed, things like that, because that part has a specific way to be punctuated and is going to give you a clue as to which other parts of the sentence need to follow the punctuation rules we're about to talk about. So look for these types of clues. We call it the dialogue tag, because that will help you find which parts of the sentence are actually dialogue or that conversation. So remember, anything spoken out loud should be inside quotation marks. So now we're starting to talk about some of these things. Let's talk about the punctuation. So the rule that we are going to memorize, and you are going to get a bright colored piece of paper that looks just like this, is QSPQ. Say it to yourself 10 times right now. QSPQ, 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 QSPQ. Okay, you get the gist. So the first Q and the last Q both stand for quotation marks. So that's these little blue things right here, or sometimes we do it like this with our fingers, because that's our symbol for quotation marks. And then the S stands for saying or sentence. So those are the words that the character is speaking. And then the P is for punctuation. So sometimes it's a comma, sometimes it's a period, sometimes it's an exclamation point, sometimes it's a question mark. It just depends where the saying falls within the sentence. So here's some common examples of how dialogue might be punctuated. So we look for our dialogue tag. We have exclaimed Jesse. So we know who's talking. Now, Jesse didn't literally say the words exclaimed Jesse, so that part is not the S. That's our dialogue tag. But what did Jesse say? Well, Jesse said or exclaimed, Happy Monday. So if Happy Monday is the S, then we know right after the S comes the P, the punctuation. So in this case, it's an exclamation point. And then around all of that come our quotation marks. So quotation marks at the beginning of the saying and quotation marks after the punctuation at the end. Our next one, it's so cold out today, stated Melanie. So our dialogue tag, stated Melanie. Now, Melanie did not literally state the words stated Melanie, but what she did say is it's so cold out today. So if it's so cold out today is the saying, our S, then right after the saying comes our punctuation, and in this case, it's a comma, because the dialogue tag, that's the rest of the sentence. And we know that periods come at the end of the sentence. So if this part is still part of the sentence, then the period goes here. And this is going to be a comma. And then around our saying and punctuation, we're going to have our quotation marks. So quotation marks at the beginning of the saying and quotation marks after the punctuation at the end. All right, next one. So sometimes your dialogue tag can come first. So we have Miguel asked, what time is lunch? Now, Miguel did not literally say the words Miguel asks. So that's a dialogue tag. And whenever you have the dialogue tag first, we want to put a comma, a little pause, to separate the dialogue tag from what the person actually said. So Miguel's saying what he actually said is, what time is lunch? And what time is lunch is a question. So the punctuation we need here is a question mark. And then around the saying and the punctuation, we put our quotation marks. So we have our quotation marks at the beginning of the saying and quotation marks at the end. Notice it's at the beginning and end of the saying, not the entire sentence. So we don't ever put quotation marks around the dialogue tag. All right, are you ready for your mind to be blown? Because this is the hardest type when you have the dialogue tag smack in the middle of the sentence. So right here, we have where mom questioned, do you think you're going at this hour? So our dialogue tag is mom questioned. Now, mom did not actually say those words, but she did say the word where, and she did say, do you think you're going at this hour? So her saying is split. So when the saying is split like that, you actually have to do QSPQ 2 times. So the first part of the saying, here's the S, you got to punctuate it. So it's not the end of the sentence. So we need a comma. And then we put quotation marks around all of it. Now, the reason we do this is so that it's separated from the dialogue tag. So we have this first QSPQ. Then we have our dialogue tag, and then this isn't the end of the sentence, and we want to separate the tag from the next saying, so we put a comma. And then we have our quotation marks, our saying, punctuation, question mark, because it's a question, and then quotation marks again at the end. So this is very detailed. You have to pay super close attention and always ask yourself, what is the person saying? Where's the dialogue tag? And then QSPQ needs to be followed. So as you're clicking through these PearDecks, you're going to see some questions. So you'll have a slide that looks like this, and I'm going to use my same examples. And it's going to ask you, how is this sentence correctly punctuated? And then there'll be some multiple choice options. Now, if you get a little confused, click back, go back to the examples so you can look and check here. Then you'll go back, say, okay, where's my dialogue tag? In this one, it's exclaimed Jesse. So if that's the tag, then that means this first part is the saying. So I'm going to make sure, does the saying follow QSPQ? So the saying is Happy Monday. So that means before that saying, we need our first Q, quotation marks. Check, they're there. So we have a quotation mark, we have our saying, then the P, punctuation, exclamation point here. Okay, check, we got the punctuation. And then quotation marks at the end is that last Q. So it follows Q, S, P, Q. And then to check my answers, I go to the next slide. Yay, it's good to go. Okay, so my thinking is correct. Next one, the tricky one. Look, this one doesn't have that punctuation in there at all. So I have to think to myself, all right, where mom questioned, do you think you're going at this hour? So mom questioned, remember from the examples, is the dialogue tag. So if that's the dialogue tag, and that means where is part of the saying, and do you think you're going at this hour is the other part. So I know I need to follow QSPQ here, and I need to follow QSPQ all through here. So it'll look something like this when it's done. So I'm going to show you as you click through some of these other sentences and what your multiple choice options are going to be. So you can see here, it now says, Jimmy shouted, see you at the game. And it says, how is this sentence correctly punctuated? And I'm going to look at all of my options here. Think through, where's my dialogue tag? Hint, hint. In this one, it's Jimmy shouted. And then figure out, what did Jimmy shout? Well, he shouted, see you at the game. And if that's his saying, that's the S in QSPQ. Now I'm going to check to see, where is QSPQ? All right. Remember, Q is quotation marks. P is punctuation. And then the last Q is quotation marks again. And then it'll show you the answers so you can check yourself. If you get it wrong, go back, make sure you choose the correct answer. So you'll see as you click through, it's alternating like that. So you've got question, answer, question, answer. So if you make mistakes, go back and change your answers. Then when you get all the way through to the end, it's going to ask you correct or incorrect. So you're simply going to look at a sentence and decide, is this correctly punctuated? Yes or no. So you'll do that for these here. And they are very similar. And then we got some really tough multiple choice. So we have a sentence in a box. It says, in this sentence, how is it correctly written? And you've got to look very closely, thinking about your dialogue tag, and then pay attention to just the underlined portion. So you got 2 of those here. And then after that, you're going to write some of your own dialogue for this picture here. Remember, QSPQ when you are typing. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I know this is the first time we're learning this, so it's kind of tricky, but just wanted to share some of my thinking to hopefully help you get started. All right, give it a try.